Hi everyone, how are you? This is Ms. Belford. I am going to walk you through some new formulas within Google Sheets that will hopefully be of value to you. I'm going to kind of first give you the layout of what each of these sheets have. And you're going to be getting this file. The whole file is called a Google Sheet, but then each one of these tabs at the bottom of the same file is each called a sheet. So we have the formulas sheet, the sales data sheet, 311 data sheet, and 311 analysis sheet. So for purposes of you understanding how to navigate through this, the formula sheet is just the names and the definitions of the formulas. We'll come back to this in a minute. The sales data sheet really exists for you to refer to as an example, because on this sheet we have data, and then over here we have we've used the data to use the formulas that were defined on the first sheet. So the first two, there's really not much for you to do in the first two sheets except to learn from them. And then in the third sheet, it's going to be almost the same idea, right? So the third sheet is going to be data for you to look at. This is real data, just so you know. There's so much data you could get off of the NewYorkCity.gov website. You could get the information for every single 311 call. And so this sheet is where you're going to pull some information from, but the analysis is where you're going to do the most work. This is where you're going to really try and make sense of the data on the previous sheet. So let's first walk through what the formulas are, the names of the formulas, what they mean, and go from there. Okay, so count if literally means you're going to count it if. So maybe you might be talking about how many calls, 311 calls came in a given day, and you wanted to figure out how many calls were made from Brooklyn. So you might just highlight a whole column and say, count it if it says Brooklyn. And then your answer might be 15,000 calls came from Brooklyn to the 311 number. And so you're just counting it if you see it in a cell, okay? Some if might be, if you're saying that those calls from Brooklyn lasted, you want to know how many of those calls lasted over 3 minutes. And if they did last over 3 minutes, how long was the call, in total? So you might, first you're going to go down, identify, it would search down a column, identify all of the calls from Brooklyn, and then it would go into another column to add it up if it was over, as we said, 3 minutes. An if statement is supplies you with a true or false result. So if I have $700 and I want to go shopping for a pair of sneakers that cost $100, do I have enough? Yes or no? And we'll walk through how those work. They're relatively easy, but they can get complicated if you have if statements within if statements. It's called nested statements. And then an average is a straight up average. It works the same way that an average works when you are doing that as a regular math example. Data validation is where you have drop-down boxes, okay, and it's in order to restrict a cell's contents to a certain set of options, you'd use data validation. To use data validation, you select the cell, then go to the data up here, the data at the top, and then select data validation. Next to the criteria, you select what the options for the cell's contents. If you use it on a range of cells, it'll create a drop-down box with the contents to choose from. So you go to data, data validation, and then you just can highlight a whole set of ranges, a range, or you could put it in and you could put in a list of terms. And then whatever you save here, we don't need to do it, it will have as a drop down. Okay? All right. So let's go and let's talk here about exactly what we're looking at and how to use this on this sheet. We're really just going to be talking about COUNTIF and SUMIF. So what are we looking at here? We are looking at, it looks like a business supply company, and people are ordering things, and they're ordering things on a given date from a certain region. The representative from the company, who I guess takes the call when the call comes in or over the internet. These are their last names. These are the items that they're selling. This is how many of each item they're selling. And then the cost of each item, a pencil, right? 95 pencils. Each one is $1.99. And then if we go here, that's the total of 95 times $1.99. Okay, so now let's go here and let's look what we have. We have the names of all of the representatives, and we want to figure out exactly how many units of anything they sold. Okay, so what we are going to say is, or how many items they sold, right? So what we're saying is Jones, we're going to sum it if we first, this is the entire column of C. So we're going to sum it if we find Jones here. This is what this formula means. If we find Jones here, okay, in C, and how do we know that it's Jones we're looking for? This L2 right here is referring, so Jones lives in L2, the word Jones, and it has to be written exactly like it's written in the C column. So you have, this is where the formula lives, and you have equals SUMIF, and I will show you something that is helpful when you are trying to do formulas. And I can just erase it here. Equals SUMIF. And if you notice over here, you get a little bit of a cheat sheet. And it says, it kind of is giving you a suggested formula. We don't want to do that right now. We want to just go to the SUMIF cheat sheet. And it's going to say, you're going to look for a range, which is, okay, I'm going to be looking for something. Where am I looking? So I go back here. I'm going to be looking in column C. And as you can see, it fills in C here. And then whenever you're going to the next criteria, you have to put a comma. Now, what is it that I'm looking for? So I'm looking in C, but what is it that I'm looking for? So I'm going to go back here. I want you to be able to see this very well. Okay, so I'm working right here. This is where I'm working. And I'm going to be looking in the C column. What am I looking for? I'm looking for L2. Now I'm back here. This is just hovering here, but this is where this whole formula is living. And how do I know that? It says M2 right here, okay? So I'm going to be looking in the C column for L2. So now I'm just going to I'm basically finding Jones somewhere in the C column. Next criteria. Now, okay, so I look here, I'm looking down here, I see Jones. Okay, now what? I want to see how many units, I'm going to sum it up, how many units Jones sold. So that's going to be this column. And then we're done. We put end parentheses, we hit return. Jones sold 396. Okay, now this takes a lot of time, but here's the thing that's really great. If you look at this next formula, the C's and the E's stay the same, but what changed? The L3. And then here the L4, and here the L5, because now I'm looking for Cavell, and now I'm looking for Jardine, and now I'm looking for Gill. But you don't need to, when you're doing these formulas, you don't need to rewrite them every time. Once you have the formula and you want it to go to the next thing, the next cell to look at, when you have this highlighted, this little box right down here in the lower right-hand corner, if you hover over it, you'll notice that your cursor goes from an arrow to crosshairs. If you click on it and you pull it down, that saves all the formulas and it rewrites all the formulas for you. So if I took all these formulas out, I hit delete, I go here, I have my result, but my formula lives here. This L2, when I drag it down, we'll change it to L3, L4, L5. You see it changing up here? Oh, I missed Smith at the bottom. I'm just going to drag it down. Okay. And now, here's a question. How many pencils were sold? This is going to be a sum if I can find the word pencil. So this is basically saying D2 through D44. I'm going to look for the word pencil, and I'm going to look for the word pencil between E2 and E44. Who sold the most units? You can find these answers over here. Okay. Who made the most money? These are the different kinds of questions that you can answer. So now if you look over here and you see that on the next sheet we have 311 data, there's a lot of data here. So you have the unique key. This would be like the caller ID of each call. You have the date that someone called 311, the date that the problem was closed, which agency. So people are calling for different things, right? So this would be the Department of Sanitation of New York, the Department of Traffic, New York Police Department, Department of Health Management and Hospitals. I think I'm making that up, but no, maybe not. Okay. Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Okay. There was a rat sighting, right? That tells you the complaint type, the descriptor, the location, the zip code, the exact address. Okay, and it goes on and on and on. Maybe a police precinct that was involved, how it was, what happened, your complaint has been received by the police department, responded to and took action. All right, so there's a whole level, lot of accountability. All right, so that's our database. Now, if we go here and we want to figure out, we're now on the last sheet. And this gets really tricky because unlike when we were working in the sales data sheet where we were working all within the same sheet, here we're looking to find information from the sheet before it. So it works pretty much the same way, but we're going to say equals, and we're going to how many NYPD complaints. So we're going to say count if, right? We're going to click on, now it has to be specific. We're doing count if, not count ifs. We're doing count if. So I click on count if, and what is it that we're looking for? Now, this is not as tricky as you think. It's the page, it's the sheet previous. So we're going back here. All I did was click at the bottom. I started my formula on the other sheet, and I clicked here on the bottom, and now I'm going to look for this agency, and I'm going to be looking, count it if, comma, and I'm going to put it in parentheses. Wait a minute. Let's do this again. Okay, count if. Now I'm in the fourth sheet. I'm going to go here, count if on this sheet. Okay, so now what is this saying? On the data, 311 data sheet, column D, comma, and now I'm going to put quote NYPD, end quote, end parentheses, and it says 1,699 complaints. How many complaints were in your zip code? So you could try and see if you could find your zip code, but it would be the same thing. Equals count if right? And you're going to do it the same way. And I'm going to let you play with this. And this is something